It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. Ha! Think that was a bit flat there. I apologize. It's been a week. It's been a week for me. I've been trying to rearrange some stuff, get the new shooting space in order, etc., etc. It turned into a much bigger project than I thought it was going to be, as did the last Gamer's Guide to Feminism episode. Holy cow. It's difficult to wrap that series up, but I digress. Feedback. Popular week. The most popular video was the video on Pamela Anderson and the whole porn being for losers thing. Now, most of the comments were in agreement. That's really strange. I'm not used to that. So, yay, we agree on porn. Good stuff. The video I did on Colin Kaepernick got a very different response. I'd love to dive into that more. Unfortunately, I didn't understand what most people were saying. I fully admit I am very lost by some of the comments there. I think there's some political rhetoric and talking points I'm not aware of, because holy cow, I was confused. The one comment I saw that did sort of take me aback was the assertion that the pig cop socks that Colin Kaepernick wore were not a reference to all police. They were just a reference to some police. I don't think that images on a pair of socks can differentiate in that regard, and that's why I disagree with that sort of thing being included in an NFL uniform. Sorry, I'm having some allergy issues because all the dust that got stirred up, so my throat is sort of today. The microaggressions article on the other hand, story on the other hand, I wasn't sure how that one was going to go, but there was some very, very interesting comments in that regard. There was a lot less people fighting and being nasty with each other, as opposed to the Colin Kaepernick video. And you guys know I don't like that. I don't like seeing comments where people are calling each other names and calling each other stupid and insulting each other's intelligence instead of just debating the facts. Not cool. And instead, on the microaggressions video, a commenter commented on the fact that the researcher that coined the term microaggressions believes that the whole microaggressions thing has been misconstrued. And I saw this comment, I'm like, really? And so I looked it up, and this commenter is absolutely right. The researcher, Daryl Wing-Sue, has actually said that he feels like it's been taken to a level he did not intend. His specific comments were, it was never meant to give him a vernacular, and then that makes it okay to stop talking. Oh, this is somebody else. Who is this? An adjunct professor. Okay. She says it was to ask people to be flexible in their thinking and be open-minded to the concept that we don't walk through the world in the same shoes. The researcher himself said that microaggressions don't always indicate that a person is racist. In fact, he said, it's often the opposite. People who engage in microaggressions are oftentimes well-intentioned, decent individuals who aren't aware that they are engaging in an offensive way towards someone else. Well, that's very interesting. And apparently neither of these academics who popularized the term microaggressions, neither of them actually coined the term. A guy by the name of Chester M. Pierce did in the 1970s. So, okay, the female researcher also researched this as well. And apparently these folks are working on a book. I say folks because you can't say guys anymore because that's a microaggression. But I find this very, very interesting. And I'm going to add a link to this video so that people can read it and decide for themselves, because this sounds like a classic example of a good idea that has fallen into the hands of activists as opposed to straight up researchers, and the results are predictable and uncomfortable. And this is why I like the feedback process. This is why I leave up the comments, since as even though it's sometimes confusing, sometimes, a lot of the times not very nice of late, because people do further my awareness of this thing, and I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful when people leave their take on it further to discussion and even disagree respectfully. I mean, there was a lot of disagreement on my comments going back to the Colin Kaepernick video, that there is no correlation between race and crime inherently. And I think people misunderstood what I was talking about there. What I meant was unfortunately, there are some underlying racial biases where race has something to do with crime as opposed to poverty. And unfortunately, there is some correlation between certain races and poverty in certain places in the US. Now, unfortunately, that means that people equate race with crime instead of poverty with crime. And there's absolutely a correlation between poverty and crime. There isn't a correlation between race and crime. And yes, people said the issue doesn't rise and fall in a box chart. Absolutely. Like, I don't deny that this is complicated. In fact, I pretty much said as much. Now, one person left a very nasty comment asking why I'm in Canada. I keep covering issues in the US. Well, first of all, sir, Pamela Anderson is originally from Canada, so you can't really say that that's a US story. But also, we have a Black Lives Matter chapter up here. If somebody does something in association with that, the US does not own that issue. That's something that affects us up here as well. Our Pride Parade got delayed for a good half hour because of Black Lives Matter activists. It isn't something that begins and ends at the US border. So I take exception in this case to the classification of these issues as American stories. They're very much not. And racism is not confined to the US. It's not exclusively a US problem. And just because Canada didn't have official slavery doesn't mean we don't have racism in this country. I mean, our equivalent to slavery is the treatment of First Nations Canadians. A lot of people don't see it as serious, but the more that comes out, the more it becomes abundantly clear that we broke the communities of Canada's Indigenous peoples, and we need to talk about that. The problem is that a huge amount of my audience is American. So I have to be very careful covering Canadian exclusive stories. It isn't relevant to 80% of my audience that Indigenous Canadians historically have been and continue to be treated like garbage. Now, I will drop it in to inform people, but making that the focus of what I do, it's just not appropriate to the audience. So that's why I focus on stories relevant to Americans, because the bulk of my audience is American. So tell me off all you want for being Canadian. I'm tailoring the content to things that my viewers understand, and I'm going to continue to do that. So I'm going to keep this one short. I know Feedback Fridays tend to be long, but we did a live one last week that was very long and everyone complained. So I'm going to be respectful of that and keep this one short. In return, I'm asking everyone who listens to this channel, please, I remind you again, you can disagree. And to be clear, there are many people who are very good at disagreement on this channel. But the uptick in nastiness and ad hominem attacks has been notable to me of late, as there has been a notable increase in subscriptions to this channel, and it's just a community thing, right? Like, we have to restate this. I don't condone, I do not support, and I do not like attacking the person instead of attacking the issue. I am very happy when I see people commenting on things like they appreciate that I criticize without ignoring the historical inequalities that continue to be relevant to this day. This sort of thing makes me happy because that's exactly the nuance I'm aiming for. But I mean, we can't ignore the fact that the internet is the place where nuance goes to die. And I'm not just going to sit back and let comments turn into a garbage fire because of the belief some people have that you can't help that on the internet. You can't help a proportion of that on the internet, but that does not have to be the majority of the comments that happen here. And I hope that this segment makes people realize that there are more productive ways to contribute. It's much more productive for me to read other people's stories, and instead of telling me off and just telling me I don't know what I'm talking about, why am I talking about US things, tell me what I got wrong. You know, I enjoy reading other people's approach to things, because a lot of the times it's not one person is right and one person is wrong. It's that people are coming at something from a different angle, and there's usually consensus to be found where it's like, okay, that's a valid viewpoint, but it doesn't actually negate mine. But that's what happens when you have an adult conversation. And I still believe that that's possible on a large scale on the internet. So for the people that enjoy just leaving overwhelmingly negative comments, no, I don't censor you. No, I don't delete your comment. But once again, I'm going to appeal to the better parts of you and ask you not to do that. Ask you not to insult the intelligence or the morality of the person you are debating. Stick to the facts. Avoid the ad hominem attacks. I'd greatly appreciate it, because it is much more productive for me to read that, and that'll give me material for future Feedback Fridays. People just yelling and swearing at each other gives me nothing. Hence the shortness of this segment.